nightmare. The motion picture everyone is talking about.
Don't go in the house.
Are you ready to press play?
The 1980s, when malls were temples, VHS tapes were sacred, and every living room had a glowing CRT altar. But behind all the pop and pizzazz of neon headbands and Michael Jackson vinyls lurked something darker, something bloodier, something that got the FBI sweating and your local Blockbuster in trouble. Welcome to the underground world of American video nasties, the horror flicks so outrageous. They didn't just scare audiences, they scared governments. While Britain was busy compiling their infamous banned list, many of the culprits were born right here in the good old US of A. These were not your polished Hollywood horrors. Nope, these were raw, violent, low-budget nightmares shot in someone's backyard, sold on murky VHS tapes, and passed around like forbidden treasure. With titles like The Driller Killer, Don't Go in the House, and Blood Feast, these American-made shockers weren't just frowned upon, they were raided, confiscated, and in some cases, prosecuted as criminal obscenity. Parents freaked out, politicians demanded censorship, and yet every horror nerd in the country had to see them. So in today's countdown, we're digging into 11 of the most infamous American video nasties films that pushed the limits of taste, triggered legal firestorms, and made the 1980s one of the most controversial decades in horror history. Stick around because number 5 is so infamous, it basically got banned for being too good at being bad. Ready to enter the VHS vault of Forbidden Americana? Let's roll the tape.
If you dare to look.
Bury me.
Dead and buried.
Not all video nasties were gory slashers or sweaty grindhouse bloodbaths. Some were elegantly disturbing, and few films pulled off that eerie mix better than Dead and Buried, a slow burn, atmospheric horror thriller that still ended up banned in the UK. Why? Because beneath its polished surface lay something truly rotten. Directed by Gary Sherman and written in part by Dan O'Bannon, co-writer of Alien, the film is set in a sleepy coastal town where tourists keep turning up dead, and then later show up alive again, walking the streets like nothing happened. As the local sheriff digs deeper, he uncovers a conspiracy that's way more terrifying than he bargained for. Unlike many of its fellow nasties, Dead and Buried is artfully shot, with a rich visual style and a haunting score, but that didn't save it from controversy, particularly one infamous scene involving a hypodermic needle to the eyeball. That moment alone got it slapped onto the video nasties list, despite the film's otherwise restrained violence. In the US, the movie had a quiet release but became a cult gem on VHS, especially among horror fans who preferred creepy over chaotic. With its blend of mystery, body horror, and small-town paranoia, it felt like the Twilight Zone took a very, very wrong turn. Today, Dead and Buried is often overlooked in favor of louder, bloodier titles, but it may be the most underrated film on this entire list. It didn't scream to get banned, it whispered, and that might have made it even more dangerous. Okay, let's clear something up. Cannibal Apocalypse sounds like an Italian cannibal flick. And yes, it was directed by Italian filmmaker Antonio Margheriti under the pseudonym Anthony M. Dawson. But here's the twist, the film was set in Atlanta. Shot in English, featured a mostly American cast including John Saxon, and had heavy US distribution. It walked like an American horror, talked like one, and for the purpose of home video bans, it definitely bit like one too. The plot: Vietnam veterans return home carrying a mysterious infection that turns them into flesh-eating maniacs. It's part war trauma, part disease horror, and part grindhouse gorefest think The Deer Hunter meets 28 Days Later, but with more exploding guts and flamethrowers. While not as nihilistic as the Italian jungle cannibal films of the time, Cannibal Apocalypse still delivered plenty of sleaze human entrails, cannibal feasts, and disturbingly out-of-place saxophone music over scenes of carnage. Needless to say, UK censors weren't fans banning it for years and placing it on the official video nasties list. In the US, it skirted controversy a bit more quietly, but still drew cult attention thanks to its VHS artwork and John Saxon's oddball casting. According to interviews, even he regretted taking the role. Today, it remains a strange hybrid half-exploitation, half-psychological horror, all coded in 1980s VHS grime. If you're into genre mashups and gastrointestinal mayhem, this one's a delicacy, though definitely not FDA approved.
They meet in the last house on the left. What began as a birthday party.
Wes Craven's first film didn't just push boundaries, it blew them to pieces, long before he gave us Freddy Krueger. The Last House on the Left, 1972, introduced audiences to a kind of horror that felt too raw, too real, and too personal. And although it predated the 1980s, its resurgence on VHS during that decade landed it squarely on the UK's Video Nasties blacklist. The plot is deceptively simple and devastating. Two teenage girls are kidnapped, tortured, and murdered by a gang of sadistic criminals. Unknowingly, the killers then seek shelter in the home of one of the victims' parents, who discovered the truth and delivered their own brutal revenge. Craven shot the film on a tiny budget with gritty, handheld realism, giving it an almost documentary feel. It's awkward, disturbing, and at times tonally bizarre, yes. There's slapstick music over police scenes, but its emotional violence is what leaves the biggest scar. In the UK, it was banned and seized under obscenity laws. In the US, it was released unrated and cut in various versions over the years. The tagline said it best to avoid fainting. Keep repeating, it's only a movie. It's only a movie. A warning that many viewers took seriously. Critics were split. Some called it brilliant and essential, others called it vile and unforgivable, but everyone agreed it was unforgettable. And so, The Last House on the Left cemented its place in horror history not just as a movie, but as a test of endurance.
Nightmare. The motion picture everyone is talking about.
If there were a trophy for most seizures caused in a censorship board, Nightmare would win it hands down. Released in 1981, this American psychological slasher was so gory, so intense, and so relentlessly unhinged that even among the video nasties, it stood out like a blood-soaked thumb. The film follows George Tatum, a mental patient released from an institution too early naturally, who is haunted by childhood trauma involving his parents, and what else enacts. As he spirals back into homicidal madness, the body count rises, and the gore gets increasingly graphic, culminating in a nightmarish final act that feels like being trapped in someone's PTSD. Directed by Romano Scavolini, though the production was American, Nightmare became notorious not just for its violence, but for the rumors surrounding it, like claims that Tom Savini had worked on the effects and later denied it, possibly due to how extreme they were. He's not credited, and the truth is still debated. In the UK, the film was actually prosecuted, one of the few titles that got a full-blown obscenity charge. In the US, it slipped under the radar, but thrived in midnight rental culture, especially among horror collectors who hunted for the rare uncut version. Nightmare is grim, sweaty, and drenched in sleaze. It's not fun, it's not funny, but for fans of raw, brutal 80s horror, it's the cinematic equivalent of staring into a blood-smeared mirror and daring yourself not to blink.
Mommy has to punish you.
If the 1980s had a movie that made even hardened horror fans wince, it was Maniac. This wasn't just a slasher, it was the slasher your parents were terrified you'd find on VHS. Directed by William Lustig and starring Joe Spinell, Maniac took the psychological horror of Psycho and cranked it up to 11 with scalpings, mannequins, and one of the most brutal shotgun kills ever put on screen. The plot follows Frank Zito, a deeply disturbed loner who stalks and murders women in New York City, collecting their scalps and decorating his apartment of mannequins like some kind of grotesque trophy room. It's grimy, it's bleak, and it's relentless. And that's exactly why it was banned. British censors went after Maniac with particular vengeance, citing its misogynistic violence and realistic gore, especially the infamous scene where Tom Savini, yes, the makeup FX legend himself, gets his head blown off in slow-mo with a shotgun. No metaphor, no cutaway, just boom. Brain matter everywhere. In the US, it never saw a wide theatrical release but thrived in the underground VHS circuit, gaining cult status with horror purists who praised its raw, sleazy intensity. Critics? Not so much. Roger Ebert called it a disgrace. Others just walked out. But Maniac has since been reevaluated as a disturbing but strangely sympathetic character study like Taxi Driver. If Travis Bickle collected hair, and for those who dare to watch, it still has the power to shock. Wait, a film from the early 60s on a list of 1980s video nasties? That's right, because when it comes to gore, Blood Feast walked so the rest could run screaming. Directed by Herschel Gordon Lewis, this ultra-low-budget flick is widely considered the first splatter film in American cinema, and decades later, it still managed to freak out the censors. The plot is delightfully deranged. A deranged caterer slaughters women as part of an ancient Egyptian ritual to resurrect a goddess. There's no subtlety, no nuance, just brightly colored blood, cheesy organ music, and acting so wooden you could carve a totem pole out of it. By the time the video nasties panic hit in the UK during the 1980s, Blood Feast was already a cult favorite among gorehounds. But the BBFC British Board of Film Classification didn't care about film history. They cared about disemboweled co-eds and severed tongues. So off the shelves it went. In America, the film was always more of a midnight curiosity, passed around by hardcore horror fans and grindhouse obsessives. Its budget was tiny, the effects crude, but the shock value off the charts for 1963, and somehow still disturbing in the Reagan era. What gives Blood Feast its charm is its innocence. It doesn't try to be art, it's just 67 minutes of glorious, gory nonsense that paved the way for everything from Texas Chainsaw to Saw. And if you've ever wondered what horror looked like before it found restraint, the answer is this. Yes, that Evil Dead, the one that launched Sam Raimi's career and turned Bruce Campbell into a cult icon. Believe it or not, The Evil Dead, now considered one of the greatest horror films of all time, was once labeled a criminal obscenity in the UK. Why? Because it was too good at being horrifying. Shot on a shoestring budget in a cabin in Tennessee, this 1981 American classic follows a group of friends who accidentally unleash demonic forces via an old tape recorder, and the infamous Necronomicon Ex Mortis. Cue the blood, the dismemberment, the possessed trees, and the now legendary camera rush shots that feel like being chased by pure evil. Unlike some other video nasties, The Evil Dead had actual artistry behind its madness, creative camera work, practical effects that still hold up today, and a uniquely frenzied tone that mixes dread with near slapstick chaos. But that's what made it dangerous. It didn't feel like junk, it felt effective. Censors in the UK didn't care. The film was prosecuted, pulled from shelves, and demonized in the media. Meanwhile, in the US, It thrived in midnight screenings and VHS rentals, becoming an essential rite of passage for horror fans. Today, it's taught in film schools, but back then it was the kind of movie you watched with one finger hovering over the stop button just in case your parents walked in.
If you have never thought about death, it's time you started thinking. Faces of Death.
Before the internet brought us real-life shock videos, there was Faces of Death, the taboo tape passed around like a cursed object at sleepovers, whispered about in school hallways, and locked away by concerned parents. Released in 1978, and later swept up in the video nasties wave, this American-made pseudo-documentary blurred the line between horror movie and snuff film. Directed by John Allen Schwartz under the name Conan LeSillaire, because of course, Faces of Death presented itself as a grim expose of death in all its forms: executions, accidents, autopsies, and animal slaughter. Some footage was real, much of it was staged, but none of it came with a warning. What made it so notorious wasn't just the content, it was the presentation. With its somber narration, clinical tone, and lo-fi VHS visuals, the film felt like you were watching something you absolutely should not be watching. And that was the point. In the UK, authorities banned it immediately. In the US, it became an underground hit, with rental copies frequently stolen or hidden behind the counter. Urban legends swirled kids claimed they saw people actually die on screen. In truth, much of it was fake, but by then the myth had already taken root. Whether you call it horror, shockumentary, or psychological warfare, Faces of Death carved out a unique spot in VHS history. It didn't just entertain, it traumatized, and proudly so.
Take off your clothes. I don't like women giving me orders.
I spit on your grave.
Few films have divided audiences, critics, and censors quite like I Spit on Your Grave, a movie so controversial that even horror fans argue whether it's exploitation or empowerment, or both. Released in 1978, but gaining full video nasty status in the early 80s, this American revenge thriller pushed boundaries so hard it practically tore them down. Directed by Mir Zarchi, the film follows a woman who is brutally assaulted by a group of men while on a riding retreat, then turns the tables in an equally brutal, prolonged act of revenge. There are no jump scares, no eerie music, just long, painfully realistic scenes that critics labeled both misogynistic trash and feminist rage cinema, depending on who you asked. In the UK, the film wasn't just banned, it became the symbol of the video nasties debate, cited in Parliament as evidence of moral decay. In the US, while not officially banned, many video stores refused to stock it, and screenings often came with protests. Roger Ebert famously called it a vile bag of garbage. But despite, or because of the outrage, the film found a cult following, especially among viewers who saw it not just as a horror film, but as a raw, unflinching portrayal of vengeance and survival. Love it or loathe it, you can't unsee it. Today, I Spit on Your Grave remains a lightning rod in horror history, one that lit fires in courtrooms, critics' columns, and late-night VHS marathons.
Don't go in the house. But if you do, don't say we didn't warn you.
If The Driller Killer was about urban madness, then Don't Go in the House was suburban trauma turned into literal fire, released in 1979, but banned shortly after during the video nasties panic. This low-budget shocker from New Jersey turned the American dream home into a house of horrors with a blowtorch. The plot: a disturbed young man named Donnie, abused as a child by his fire-obsessed mother, now lives alone in a big, echoey house and hears voices. When his mother dies, he begins capturing young women, chaining them up, and setting them on fire, slowly, methodically. And yes, the infamous flamethrower scene is exactly as disturbing as it sounds. British censors didn't even blink. They yanked this tape off shelves immediately. But in the US, the film caused just as much uproar, especially when it was discovered in the horror sections of innocent neighborhood video stores next to Ghostbusters. Moral outrage ensued. Despite its shaky acting and awkward pacing, the film is remembered for its intensely uncomfortable atmosphere and deeply twisted take on trauma. And let's not forget the terrifying sound design. This is one of those movies where silence is scarier than the screams. Eventually, the movie was re-released with cuts, then restored in full for horror aficionados. Today, it lives on as a grimy cult relic, proof that some houses really should have just burned down. If there's one VHS tape that screamed, "You're definitely not supposed to be watching this," it's The Driller Killer, released in 1979, but gaining notoriety in the early 80s. This ultra-grimy New York City slasher became a poster child for the video nasties, panic thanks in no small part to its graphic cover art of a man getting a power drill to the forehead. Directed by and starring Abel Ferrara, the film follows a struggling artist who slowly descends into madness and begins murdering homeless people with a power drill. Shot guerrilla style in the seediest corners of Manhattan. It's less a polished horror flick and more a sweaty, noisy psychological meltdown captured on tape. At the time, its gritty style and shocking imagery were seen as a direct threat to public morality. While critics debated whether it was art or just exploitation, British authorities didn't hesitate, they banned it outright, largely due to the disturbing VHS box art rather than the film itself. Ironically, that only fueled its legend. What makes it unforgettable isn't just the gore, it's the atmosphere, grimy apartments, flickering neon signs, a soundtrack that sounds like someone banging metal trash cans in a basement. It's pure 1970s urban decay, bottled and served raw. Eventually, it faded into cult status, but if you ever find a dusty copy with the original cover, that's not just a tape, that's horror history. And probably a red flag at airport customs. And there you have it, 11 American horror films so intense, so unfiltered that they didn't just scare audiences, they scared entire governments. Back in the 1980s, the VHS tape wasn't just a format, it was a cultural battleground. Parents feared it, politicians condemned it, but for horror fans, it was a portal into dark, forbidden worlds that mainstream theaters wouldn't touch. Some of these movies were crude, some were deeply artistic, some probably should have come with a therapist, but they all share one thing: they dared to go further than anyone else, and they paid the price in bans, raids, and reputation. And somehow, that just made them more legendary. So now it's your turn. Which of these did you sneak a peek at back in the day? Which one messed you up the most? Or did we miss a title that deserves a spot on this list? Let us know in the comments. We want to hear your stories from under the covers, behind the couch, or peeking through your fingers. If you enjoyed this nostalgic dive into VHS horror history, hit that like button like it's 1985, smash subscribe so you don't miss the next episode, and don't forget to share this video with the one friend who definitely rented The Evil Dead way too young. Next time, we're cracking open a new tape. Maybe we'll dive into the most absurd horror sequels of the 80s, or bizarre Halloween specials that gave kids nightmares. Either way, it's gonna get weird. Until then, keep your tracking straight, your tapes rewound, and whatever you do, don't go in the house.